I'm John McKee, editor of Messianic Apologetics. Messianicapologetics.net. And I would like to welcome you to this episode of Messianic Insider, your theology and news roundup for August the 28th, 2025. There's some certainly heartbreaking things happening in the world right now. Many of you are by now aware of the shooting which took place in Minneapolis. We'll be covering that among our news stories further on. The world is a dark place, and these kinds of things, unfortunately, happen. And this is just an important prompt to be sure you are praying for peace in Israel, Gaza, peace in Ukraine, Russia, sanity here on the American home front, especially with some big dramatic things taking shape, peace in the world. And indeed, these are some very hard things for us to sort through with the fall high holidays coming up in just a month or so. And as we approach the weekend, our own family will be remembering some things which are causing us to be somewhat sensitive, different death anniversaries in particular. All right, so today on our Theology Roundup, we're going to be discussing Revelation 6, 9 through 11, and the souls under the altar. Our study is taken from our ministry publication, Messianics and the Afterlife. You can look at this via outreachisraelbookstore.com. It's available in both paperback as well as ebook for Amazon Kindle. And of course, what do you do with Revelation 6, 9 through 11? Now, I'm not sure how this came up. It may have been on some forum and different debates and discussions, but I just felt a prompt to add the issue of the souls under the altar to the list of topics, because this is something which definitely factors into whether or not there is complete unconsciousness between death and resurrection, or whether a human person dies and their consciousness goes to another dimension prior to the resurrection. And indeed, Revelation 6, 9 to 11 is frequently brought up as a strong proof text in favor of a conscious, disembodied afterlife prior to the resurrection. So we're going to be reviewing this. Let me switch windows really quickly, and we'll discuss Revelation 6, 9 through 11. Okay, perfect. There we go. All right, Revelation 6, 9 through 11. When the Lamb broke the fifth seal, I saw underneath the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of God and because of the testimony which they had maintained. And they cried out with a loud voice, saying, "How long, O Lord, holy and true, will you refrain from judging and avenging our blood on those who dwell on the earth?" And there was given to each of them a white robe, and they were told that they should rest for a little while longer until the number of their fellow servants and their brethren who were to be killed, even as they had been, would be completed also. New American Standard. Both psychopanicists, or those who believe in soul sleep, and those who believe in an intermediate afterlife recognize that a great deal of symbolism is employed in the book of Revelation. Much of this, especially if one is a premillennialist, will only be known for certain as God's plan of salvation history unfolds sometime in the future. Yet here in Revelation 6, 9 through 11, at the breaking of the fifth seal, it is difficult for one not to see a conscious, disembodied post-mortem state portrayed, even if those in view are in a state of rest. Here, as the Apostle John witnessed, I saw underneath the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of God and because of the testimony which they had maintained. Revelation 6:9, New American Standard. It is right to recognize how John saw, the Greek verb horao, these souls. They are not just some symbolic representations of people like a chorus one would encounter in a Greek play. John did more than just hear the pleas of the souls as though they were some kind of poetic voice, not really intended to be viewed as actual persons who were viciously martyred. It is not at all improper to view souls here as being just people, given the wide array of usages available for psuche, because it is the location of where these people are crying out which needs to be taken into consideration. The setting depicted in Revelation was not people symbolically crying out from the ground, but rather they are associated with the altar found at the temple of the tabernacle of testimony in heaven. Revelation 15:5, New American Standard. These believers who have died, presumably as martyrs, entreated the Lord to enact his righteous judgment upon sinners. Revelation 6:10. Here, wearing some kind of white robes, heaven is depicted as a place of rest and refreshment. John 14:2. As these martyrs would have to wait just a little while longer. Revelation 6:11, until God's plan could be fully enacted. Robert A. Morey summarizes in Death in the Afterlife, quote, how this passage has always proven a great difficulty to those who deny that believers ascend to heaven at death, unquote. Psychopanicists deny that these souls are actual disembodied people in heaven by basically allegorizing the text in striving to overcome what they believe is a Platonic dualistic reading. They have actually embraced a cinematic reading consistent with ancient Greek plays. These souls are simply to be likened to the voice of a chorus in the background, while God, his angels, Satan and his demons, and various other figures in the book of Revelation are to be taken as literal persons and entities. These souls are viewed as just a poetic or cinematic representation. But how can a Bible reader honestly justify people not being people? What the souls in heaven appealed was, how long, sovereign Lord, holy and true, until you judge the inhabitants of the earth and avenge our blood? Revelation 6:10, New International Version. Their request was how long it would be until their murderers and or the system which slew them will have been dealt with and defeated. As much as the resurrection of their bodies would serve to vindicate their martyrdom, the specific request of these souls was actually not to be resurrected. Their principal concern was actually to see the fallen world system overthrown and the government of the Messiah placed upon planet Earth. Revelation 6:9 through 11 actually helps Bible readers to understand the purpose of an intermediate afterlife a great deal. Psychopanicists commonly say that going to heaven after death would make the resurrection of the body a kind of afterthought. But this scene communicates that the company of holy ones or saints in heaven is likely active, especially martyrs, in appealing to Yeshua that the next stage of salvation history begin as soon as possible. Bruce Milne observes in The Message of Heaven and Hell, quote, whatever the experience of the intermediate state may amount to, it is not the end of the journey in any sense. It has within it a deep and irredeemable limitation, unquote. As great as going to heaven and seeing the Lord may be, only when he returns and defeats his enemies on earth can those who slew his holy ones or saints in cold blood be shown his full power and majesty. All right, so the souls under the altar in Revelation. I believe that they have to be the martyrs, and we're not dealing with just some kind of symbolic representation. Now, their specific request of the Lord is, how long is it going to be until we are vindicated? And as I said in the discussion, as much as the future resurrection of the dead would definitely be a part of that, the specific request was, how long is it going to be before you get on with your plan? How long is it going to be before you return and enact true justice and righteousness in the earth? And with that in mind, the book of Revelation isn't focused on, look, die, fly away to heaven, and sit on a cloud and play your golden harp, which is what a lot of people think heaven is all about. No, it's about the return of the Messiah, him defeating the corrupt world system, and true justice and righteousness prevailing on the earth via his reign. That's supposed to give hope and faith to people today, people like you and people like me, that God's plan for the future is going to break in, and we're going to see, yes, the resurrection of the dead, but also the full-on arrival of his kingdom. All right, let me switch windows back. Okay, good. And once again, this brief study has been taken from our ministry publication, Messianics and the Afterlife. Okay, so let's move on to some current events, some news. And indeed, if we're all not crying out to the Lord, how long, O Lord, what are we doing? Right? Now, we provide this news analysis after the theology roundup because the news is, of course, time sensitive. Things change from day to day. We're already beginning to see that with some of the situations. I stress, please pray for Israel and Gaza, pray for Russia and Ukraine, pray for peace, and pray for what's happening here on the American home front, and pray for peace in the world. I mean, we've got the fall high holidays coming up. There are a lot of things which clearly demonstrate that the world is a not so nice place. And for us as believers, as we look toward the coming of the Messiah, whether it is sooner or not so soon, we do have to stay up to speed with what is happening intelligibly and stay grounded so that we can maximize the time and the resources the Lord has granted to us. All right, so our first news story. And by the way, all these news stories will be listed later today when this episode is archived on MessianicApologetics.net. You can go look at them in greater detail yourself. From Newsmax, August the 27th, going beyond allegations of sowing discord in America and funding Democrats, President Donald Trump is now calling for billionaire George Soros and his liberal financier network, led by his radical left son, to face federal racketeering charges. Ooh. Now, I'm sure most of you are not friends of George Soros. You don't like what he does. How much has he been funding all of these liberal causes, all this protesting we've seen over the years? This is huge to see the president say, look, he needs to be brought up on some kind of charges. Will it happen? I don't know. But that would certainly if it were to happen, a lot of things would be uncovered about his and many others' influence. Okay, here's some more local news to the state of Texas, where I live, from the Instagram channel Dallas, Texas TV. Governor Abbott officially signed new laws that stop certain foreign countries from buying land in Texas. On Tuesday, Governor Greg Abbott signed a bill he said will protect Texas from hostile foreign adversaries, naming China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea during the ceremony. Yes, and Texas is larger than France. Okay, I have lived back in Texas now for almost 13 years in December, and there was a lot of Texas I still haven't seen. I'm kind of ashamed to say that, but a lot of Texas is farmland, it's ranch land, and there are these reports you hear about different, but mainly Chinese, but other companies, and they buy large swaths of American land, some of it for agriculture, but some of it is close to, like military bases and things like that. Well, here, Governor Abbott is to be absolutely commended. He doesn't want known foreign adversaries of the United States buying up large portions of land here in the state of Texas. Continuing with the American home front, from the New York Post yesterday, August the 27th, here's a clip from Senator Chuck Grassley told Miranda Devine on Pod Force One that recent political scandals, from Russiagate to the Biden family's influence peddling, are part of a massive cover-up within the government that in time will be seen as worse than the Watergate scandal. Okay, so what's going to happen there? I mean, we certainly have mentioned over the past few weeks developments unfolding with the Epstein issue, Russiagate, other things involving election 2020. Now, this from the most senior U.S. Senator, Chuck Grassley of Iowa. Yeah, what's going to come in the next couple of weeks or months? And how are people going to respond to this? How are Americans going to respond to this when they find out that perhaps many of the people who they place their trust in, their confidence in, are not to be trusted and they are unreliable? Okay, shifting toward the international scene, from the Epoch Times yesterday, August the 27th. Trump's envoy Witkoff to meet Ukrainians in New York. I think we may end up seeing a bilateral meeting. My own opinion is that the president is going to be needed at the table to finish a deal, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff said on Fox News. Okay, so of course there are a lot of questions about what's going to happen, what's not going to happen regarding Russia, Ukraine. Is the president going to have to be there to kind of corral Putin and Zelensky if they actually had a meeting? Is he going to have to be there to, like, okay, folks, we got to have a deal. We have to have peace. We can't have this killing continue indefinitely with Russians and Ukrainians, an entire generation of them subjected to this kind of just warfare. We don't know. We know that this is something which can just completely fall through. Last week at this, 2 weeks ago at this time, many of us saw the anticipation building regarding the summit in Alaska between President Trump and President Putin. And then later, on the Monday following, the summit at the White House with President Zelensky and the different NATO and European leaders. What's happening now? Is this going to come to fruition? Something going to happen? We're going to have a resolution to this problem? Or is it all going to fall through and we're just going to continue to, at the very least, see a very tense Eastern European region? With that in mind, from the New York Post yesterday, Baby-faced Russian children as young as 8 have been taught how to throw hand grenades and carry rifles at a bizarre summer camp designed to train up the next generation of Vladimir Putin's military. Okay, now for certain, it does need to be recognized that military schools, military academies, that's nothing new. But when you see something like this, first of all, it does not help Russia's image in the world. And secondly, I think the much bigger question, are populations like the Russian people, are they being acclimated to always having to fight, always having to be in this, warfare mindset? And how does that affect the conflict with Ukraine? How does that affect the likelihood or not so much likelihood of there being some kind of peace able to come to pass? I don't think it looks very good myself for the Russia-Ukraine situation. I might be wrong, but I don't think it looks very good. Okay, our next story, and this is from the Times of Israel, also involving Steve Witkoff. This is from the 26th of August, so it might be a little dated, but we need to take note of it anyway. Witkoff says he hopes to end wars in Gaza and Ukraine by beginning of 2026. All right, well, you have just over 4 months to go for that. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff says, we are negotiating multiple entries of countries into the Abraham Accords. And if you scroll down a little bit, you see the U.S. is reportedly trying to coax Azerbaijan, which already has ties with Israel, to enter the Abraham Accords. And of course, Azerbaijan is part of the former Soviet Union. It's located to the immediate north of Iran, shares a border with Georgia and Armenia. We'll see. All right, now for what took place yesterday in Minneapolis, we'll go straight to Kash Patel, the FBI director. Updates on the shooting in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The FBI is investigating the shooting as an act of domestic terrorism and hate crime targeting Catholics. Yes, and all of us wholeheartedly condemn what took place. This kind of violence is completely unjustified. It's terrorism, and it's just an abomination. There were 2 fatalities, an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. In addition, 14 children and 3 adults were injured. Any kind of school should be a safe place for children, young people to be at, much less any kind of a religious school. The shooter has been identified as Robin Westman, a male born as Robert Westman. The FBI will continue to provide updates on our ongoing investigation with the public as we are able. So for certain, there's going to be continued investigations into this. Who was involved? What were their motives? Etc. Now, along with that, because straight from the FBI director, shooter Robin Westman, formerly Robert Westman. So a number of stories. Breitbart, Minnesota church school. Shooting suspect identifies as female, changed name at 17 years old. Okay? But look, we know that this kind of evil crime, it can be committed by anyone, whether biologically male, biologically female, or otherwise. Here from the New York Post yesterday, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey preached about trans rights during a presser on the mass shooting that left 2 children dead at Annunciation Catholic School hours after it was revealed gunman Robin Westman identified as a transgender woman. Okay, so we need to just take note of this, because there are going to be a lot of people who, when following the news about this terrible tragedy, they're going to use it as a springboard to go after transgenders, LGBTQ, etc., rather than focus on the main issue, which is small children, young children were killed. They were harmed. And we'll just see how this unfolds. But we definitely believe in praying for the loved ones of those whose lives were lost, those who were harmed, to come to complete recovery, and that the investigation is able to go well with the right information coming out to the public. All right, here's one which came across my Instagram feed yesterday. It's probably accurate. Most hated country on each continent. And here in 1942, you see the Western Hemisphere almost seemingly hating Imperial Japan the most, most of the Asia, and here you have Australia hating Imperial Japan the most, whereas most of Europe and most of Africa hating Nazi Germany the most. Fast forward to the year 2025, North America hates China the most, South America, Israel. Most of Europe hates Russia the most. Most of Asia hates the United States the most. Australia, Oceania hates China the most. Africa hates Israel the most. Now, some of these, big powers like China, Russia, United States, you can understand, but Israel, that tiny little slip of land, and then one of the comments, well, and has the Indian flag on it. We know these kinds of things can change. We know these kinds of things are subjective, but the question is, why do people hate that tiny little strip of land? Aren't there other, larger powers which influence your condition of life, your economic disposition, etc.? Okay, from Time Magazine, Instagram, August the 26th. Trump suggests Americans are open to a dictator. Trump said that he thinks Americans may like a dictator, though he wouldn't describe himself as one. They say we don't need him. Freedom, freedom, he's a dictator, Trump told reporters at the Oval Office. A lot of people are saying maybe we like a dictator. I don't like a dictator. I'm not a dictator. I'm a man with great common sense and a smart person. Now, why are some people in the world of ideas out there wanting to label President Trump as a dictator? Now, of course, the term dictator has a background going back to mainly ancient Rome, where a figure was declared to be dictator for a limited period of time, often to manage some kind of a crisis or emergency. Coming from the city of Cincinnati, we were definitely trained in the tradition of the Roman Cincinnatus, who was someone who operated as a Roman dictator for a while, trying to sort through a crisis in Rome, and then later he handed back his powers and went back to his farm, basically. Now, in the more modern context, a dictator is someone who would be granted, or someone who would assume, unlimited power. We can commonly think of Chancellor Palpatine acquiring unlimited power, becoming the emperor in the Star Wars universe. But a lot of this comes because of Trump, what he's doing in Washington, D.C., bringing in the National Guard, trying to reduce crime, a lot of his executive orders, trying to undo what he considers to be the damage from the previous Biden administration, and the possibility of moving National Guard troops to other crime hotspots in the continental United States. That's what a lot of this claims of a dictator are based in. I don't see Trump ever becoming a full outright dictator, but I do see him, from his mind, having to use the executive office to do some important things like stop crime in Washington, D.C., stop crime in other areas. And hey, we will obviously see, but even people who are Trump skeptics, they thought he would be better than the alternative, the speculation meter can go up and say, see, he's assuming power, and he's said that we're in the golden age of America. How do we not know that this is going to give rise to the anti-Messiah, antichrist? Maybe he himself is the beast. So that is not far from a lot of the discussion you see taking place. All right, our next news story, thought we should just pass this along from Rapid Response 47. By order of President Trump, the flags at the White House have been lowered to half-staff as a mark of respect for the victims of the senseless acts of violence perpetuated in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Yes, absolutely. And I hope you all have had a special prayer in your quiet time by now for what has happened. Now, switching to the Middle East, this is a video short clip passed on by Vivid on X. The number one reason America should support Israel: America and Israel stand stronger, united. And a lot of this goes into things we've already passed along, but it deals with the assets Israel provides America in using some of America's military hardware in a hostile Middle East, also a lot of the intelligence and just the technological benefits America gets from our relationship with the state of Israel. So that's a useful clip to pay attention to and pass on if necessary. Okay, so back to claims that Donald Trump is a dictator. No, I don't believe he's a dictator. I don't believe Donald Trump is the beast. But here's something passed on by Charlie Kirk yesterday, August the 27th. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser says she greatly appreciates President Trump's law enforcement surge. And remember, she's a member of the other political party, which has caused an 87% drop in carjacking and a huge drop in robberies, murders, and more. This surge has been important to us. People who would be dead or maimed in D.C. are now alive today because of what the president did. So why are Democrats and the rest of the country fighting to make sure their own citizens keep dying? That's his commentary. And indeed, we will see if President Trump makes good on his word and that he's going to do something similar in a place like Chicago, New York. Of course, we should also keep our eyes on Los Angeles, San Francisco, among other, crime-ridden cities. Okay, 5 more stories to go. Okay, so here's a clip I just thought I should pass on. You can watch it in its entirety later. It's 40 seconds, passed on by libs of TikTok. CNN's Dana Bash just said this on live TV. Forget about thoughts and prayers. These kids were literally praying when they were murdered through a church window. And their commentary is disgusting. Hey, Dana Bash is free to have her opinion. And certainly everyone is going to react to this kind of tragedy in a different way. We do have to recognize that. And usually after you've slept on it, you respond, very emotionally. You've calmed down a little bit and you can sort of sort through the details. But when you say, forget praying, it's like it'd be far better to say, we know many people are praying, but there are a lot of significant questions which are going to be asked about what, why, how, etc. And we need to stay calm. I'm not so sure some of those kinds of remarks are at all helpful. But, I've never been in that situation. Most of you have never been in that kind of situation. How do any of us respond to this kind of thing? All right, here's a useful or an interesting one, I should say, from, excuse me, open source intel from yesterday, August the 27th. Thought it was interesting. Israeli economy minister Nir Barkat. So this is an opinion regarding the Israel-Gaza Palestinian situation. Israel intends to break up the Palestinian Authority, extend sovereignty across Judea and Samaria, and pursue an Emirates-style framework for Palestinian cities. Okay, now we know that the whole situation in Gaza, the West Bank. All kinds of proposals have been made over many decades. Excuse me again. And I remember going back to the end of the year 2000, Yasser Arafat, as Bill Clinton is fond of saying, was offered about 92% or so of what he wanted, and he turned it down. Prime Minister Ehud Barak at the time was ready to give 92% of what Arafat wanted, and seemingly the Palestinians will never have that opportunity again, ever. But this is an interesting solution. Israel is going to form seemingly one state, Israel, and these different Palestinian areas are going to be, broken up and have some kind of a Emirates arrangement like the UAE. The UAE is a collection of different Emirates, two of the most notable ones being Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and they're semi-autonomous, but they're all, politically united. I don't know how this kind of proposal would work, but it needs to be noted as a possibility they have put out on the table. And of course, a lot of people are saying, look, what kind of a human being is going to be able to solve the Israel-Palestinian crisis? What kind of a person is going to be able to solve the Russia-Ukraine war? And that's why, whether it's accurate or not, end-time speculation is high. Anti-Messiah candidates are being sought after in the world. And we as God's people, of course, need to be paying attention. All right, this is something which should get us upset. Passed on by Visegrad 24. Mined land in Ukraine now exceeds the size of England, from The Guardian. By June 2025, the area of Ukrainian territory contaminated with mines and other explosive devices reached 139,000 square kilometers, surpassing the size of England, 130,000 square kilometers, according to the Italian Institute for International Political Studies. More than 6 million people live in or near these hazardous areas. Yeah, war is not good. I don't care. I mean, sometimes like who is right, who is wrong. War is bad. This is the kind of stuff which happens in war. And even if for some small chance, some kind of peace agreement's able to be, hammered out between Russia, Ukraine, they stop the fighting. There's an area the size of England filled with landmines and other munitions. I mean, cleaning this up is going to take years, if not a decade or two. And still in some of these, war zones, even going back to the First World War, there are areas where there is unexploded ordnance. I mean, this is awful. Okay, also from Visegrad 24. Axios reports that the foreign ministers of France, Germany, the UK have told Marco Rubio they will trigger the snapback sanctions mechanism against Iran on Thursday. Still trying to find out the development of this. But the sanctions will seriously impact Iran's military and economic capabilities. Yeah, even after the 12-day war, we still have to follow the situation with Iran. They still haven't decided to renounce the possibility of having nuclear weapons. Okay, and what's going to happen? We'll see if that transpires. I didn't see anything right before going live this afternoon. Okay, and then finally from Open Source Intel Defender, the Israeli Air Force carried out a series of precision strikes within the last hour, so that's as of 10:04 a.m. today, against several residential homes in the Yemeni capital of Sana'a, reportedly belonging to senior officials with the Iranian-backed Houthi terrorist group in Yemen. Israel states that the IDF will continue to act forcefully against the Houthi terrorist regime, alongside intensifying damage to the Hamas terrorist organization in Gaza, while acting to remove any threat to the citizens of the state of Israel. Okay, so yeah, continue to pray that this situation can be resolved quickly. We know, especially as it's usually during the season of September, a lot of diplomats, world diplomats, that go to the United Nations. So this whole issue about who's going to recognize an independent Palestine, who's not going to recognize one, that's coming to some kind of a point event. Some of these other things, they're coming to possible point events. And it's all on the heels of the fall high holidays. So this year, hopefully, we're going to be able to see a lot of people in today's Messianic community. Yes, they're going to be praying, Lord, forgive us of our sins, show us our faults. These are common themes for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. But we actually have some things, to pray for regarding, Lord, peace in the world, peace in Israel, a cessation of warfare, stop the bloodshed. How much of that are we going to be able to see? And I know that, when I attend my own local congregation and I see what some of the prayers are, which are uplifted, how many of these things are weighing on the hearts and minds of people, or how many are in a little bubble acting like nothing is going on? Are we just not praying about it because of omission, possibly, or because we are praying out of avoidance? We'll see what happens. Every congregation is different. Every setting is different. But on Messianic Insider, 5 times a week, we try to keep the conversation going and for you to be aware of these potential issues. Because we don't call the Messianic community the end-time move of God for nothing. It means that we have to pay attention and stay calm and stay grounded as much as we can. As always, on behalf of Outreach Israel Ministries and Messianic Apologetics, I would like to sincerely thank you for your ongoing prayers, encouragement, and support for all of our ministry efforts. I encourage you to visit our website, messianicapologetics.net. You can find some free articles, frequently asked questions entries, look up some of the back episodes of Messianic Insider, back issues of Outreach Israel News, and you can check on a lot of our other adventures over the years. I got my tongue tied about that one. We are human. We'll see you again tomorrow with another episode of Messianic Insider. Until then, may God bless you, shalom, and take care.